Hi, and welcome to this live reading from A Heart So Savage by April Moran. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Preface. He saw me. He took me. He ruined me. Now I'm his. I belong here with this monster, yet I still long for freedom. I say that I hate him, but my heart pounds faster when he kisses me. He breaks me, spoils me, taunts me when I'm on my knees before him. His punishments are exquisite pleasures I willingly endure, because I crave how he puts me back together again and again. I'm nothing more than payment for a debt, but Kingston treats me as though I'm his most precious treasure. He swears that I'm safe, but the treachery of our enemies is subtle and cruel. They will not stop until I am at their mercy and Kingston is dead from a bullet in the back. But I can ruin those seeking our destruction. I can save us before all is lost. Will love weaken or strengthen us when it matters most? I'm Ava Bella Blue, a prisoner trapped in a gilded cell of lust and secrets. Kingston Von Winter is the beast I have fallen in love with. Crush, conquer, protect. It's his personal motto, but I've adopted it as my own now. His obsession will become our salvation, and I will win this king's savage heart before this is over. Chapter 1. Freedom and captivity are one and the same when you kiss me. For the next 5 days, Kingston only returned at night when Ava was already asleep. His careful movements as he slid into bed always woke her. She would lie perfectly still, barely breathing, waiting for her captor to roll over on top of her, waiting for the moment he shoved himself between her thighs and took what he wanted with cruel, hurtful hands. But he did not touch her, not even inadvertently during his sleep. It was as though an invisible barrier existed between them, one that Kingston himself erected. Curled into a tight ball, Ava would drowsily listen to Kingston's steady breathing until she fell back into the dark oblivion of sleep. It was all so very confusing, especially after the intensity of their interactions before and his calm assertion she belonged to him. That Kingston now practically ignored her was unexpected. But Ava was thankful for the tiny reprieves while lying beside him in the darkness. Her head no longer ached from Malcolm's cuffing and the bruises were fading, but doing battle with Kingston now was unthinkable. Better to regain her strength and her wits before tackling this impossible situation head on. Ava wondered what Kingston did during his absences, as she roamed the castle-like halls of the den. She sat for hours on the terrace overlooking the deep woods surrounding the mansion and explored the grounds, always with Polly or Jack trailing in her wake. In the mornings, when she woke, Kingston would already be up and dressed. While she picked at breakfast from a tray delivered to the suite, he silently drank coffee, patiently waiting until she pushed away from the table. Other than that, she spent the rest of her days alone, until the following morning when the routine repeated itself. Kingston's silences were frightening. No way would she ask him where he went, especially since he barely managed a gruff admonishment that she be a good girl each time he left her. This morning was different. Once she showered and dressed, Kingston escorted her to the game room and issued a stern directive. It was the first time he'd spoken more than a few words to her since Malcolm's assault. You will stay in this room until I return. I have a meeting with Oliver and others, so it isn't wise that you roam the estate today. Tucking a stray curl behind her ear, Kingston smiled crookedly. You'll find this a better alternative than confinement to my suite. Kingston's command was infinite. There was no arguing or defying him, but Ava's mind raced with scenarios as he left her without another word. Why was he meeting with Oliver again? What were the two men doing? Were they disposing of bodies? Plotting the murder of her awful brother? And the others Kingston mentioned, who could they be? Maybe they were potential buyers. Maybe placing her in the game room provided some kind of sick display. After all, cameras recorded everything in this mansion. Like a bird in a pretty cage, she could flit around the room while being assessed. Ava's hands clenched into fists. Be sensible. He has no intention of letting me go. Kingston already said she would not be sold, but expecting a murdering kidnapper to keep his word was unrealistic. Releasing a frustrated sigh, Ava leaned a shoulder against one of the window casements, tracing the intricate carving with her fingertips. Just outside the deep, tall windows, the mountains loomed. Awash in color from the late afternoon sun, scarlet and burnt orange hues blazed in the vivid contrast with the dull green of the lawn. As if one entity, a flock of small birds, darted and swooped against the brilliant blue sky before disappearing into the thick trees. Considering everything she'd been through since arriving at the den, the quiet of the game room and the autumn-hued beauty outside this lavish prison was a sanctuary. She should be grateful. "Stay here," Ava muttered aloud, repeating Kingston's command. His dominion over her new life meant obeying him in all things. The 5 rules laid out following Malcolm's attack were clear enough. The terms of her imprisonment might as well be literal chains binding her body. Disobey, and she would be punished. She moved away from the window, restless in captivity as the hours passed. Maybe Kingston had changed his mind about keeping her. Realizing she was chewing a fingernail, Ava quickly distracted herself by selecting a pool stick from the wall rack. Absently, she considered the usefulness of the room's items as weapons. So many things could serve in that capacity, from pool sticks and cue balls to chess pieces. Even the numerous decanters of scotch and whiskey lined up neatly on the built-in bar would make excellent missiles. How hard would it be to take one of the animal trophy heads off the walls? There was one she eyed with more than a passing curiosity. It was an antelope of some sort, with wickedly sharp horns jutting out like twin daggers. The whole thing could be utilized as both shield and weapon. Ava's gaze drifted to the cavernous stone fireplace. The iron stand beside it contained all the usual instruments for tending a fire: a miniature shovel and brush, tongs, a poker with a curved hook on its end. All potential weapons, but not practical if she intended on hiding the fact she was armed. But there, mounted on the wall over the rough wooden beam mantel, was a pair of daggers that looked real enough. They flanked an exotic ceremonial mask, which might have been used during some sort of ancient ceremony. An enormous hairy boar's head hung beside the daggers, leaving one to conjecture the ugly beast was slain using those sharp instruments. If those daggers were real, she could slice a man's neck open with barely a flick of her wrist, stab him through the heart until the ivory handle was flesh against flesh and the blade buried deep. It would be easy. Killing a man with those daggers. Can I do it? Shuddering at the bloody path her thoughts careened down, Ava turned to the heavily carved pool table. Like everything else in this house, it appeared antique, an exquisite game piece which likely cost more than her entire college education. Ava rolled the white cue ball across the length of the pool table. What was taking so long for Kingston to return? Why did she even care? His absence allowed her to think clearly for the first time in days. Why did I agree to be his? Her fingers tightened around the pool stick. Matters were much simpler when she'd been held in the dungeon cell, when she was an untouchable prisoner, a valuable prize to be protected with her choices snatched away. And now? Now Ava wasn't sure what she was other than his. And being the property of Kingston Von Winter was a dangerous, confusing thing to be. The click of the double doors swung Ava's attention around. Gripped with mounting apprehension, she watched Oliver enter the game room. A scowl twisted his lips. He was alone. Fear twisted Ava's stomach, but she remained silent. Where's Kingston? Don't worry, he's coming, Oliver answered the unspoken question. Leaning against the bar, he poured a finger of bourbon into a cut crystal tumbler. My brother wouldn't dare dream of leaving us alone for too long. Ava gripped the pool stick tighter, unable to keep her gaze from drifting to the daggers over the fireplace. Oliver raised his glass in mock salute. You are quite the surprise, Miss Blue. Don't know how you managed it, but you've completely captured my brother's attention. I don't want his attention. He can't seem to help himself, Oliver grinned. I think you marking him, scarring him just that little bit, brought out a previously unknown side of my brother. He's suddenly very possessive. Never seen him act this way before. He's become even more of a psychotic asshole than I ever thought possible. Psychotic? Oliver had no room to judge on that score. Oliver stalked closer, but Ava refused to cower. She stood her ground while he circled her. I saw the video feed of Malcolm attacking you. His breath skated over her shoulder. Aware of the camera system inside this house of secrets and betrayals, his words were low enough that they would not be picked up on audio. Gotta admit, it pisses me off that dumb motherfucker got a taste of you. He was as repulsive as you are. Oliver trailed a finger down her arm. Yeah, well, he died for it, but at least he went out happy with your flavor in his mouth. I'm fucking jealous as hell about that, but who knows? Maybe I'll get my own chance with you one day. Ava's chin lifted higher with shaky bravado. Try it. Kingston might slice you up, too. Oliver's laughter was genuinely amused. His blue eyes gleamed. Your dear brother underestimated your worth, Ava. He gave you up too quickly. Carson could have paid the debt and recovered his losses, plus more, if he'd just sold you to begin with. His stupidity is Kingston's gain, and I know King will come up with all sorts of creative ways you can pay off $2 million. That's a hell of a lot of blowjobs. Maybe he'll show me the tapes when he's done with you. I deserve a little bonus since I can't get my hands on the real thing. Is your offer to help me escape no longer an option? Ava asked with a sarcastic lilt to her voice. Any assistance from this man could not be trusted. She knew that now. The plan she once entertained of playing Kingston and Oliver against one another must be abandoned. She would never ask him for anything. He was a sadistic, evil snake who would bite the hand of anyone who ventured too close. The man was probably more damaged than Kingston himself. Kingston wanted to possess her, to own her innocence, drag her down into wickedness and pleasure, but Oliver? His desires ran to deeper waters. He would hurt her simply because she was a woman who now belonged to his brother. Oliver's covetous gaze turned heated as it raked her form. Oh, I'll still help you, Miss Blue, if you pay the price for my assistance. My tastes are a bit more primitive than King's, but you look like a quick learner. I'd love to teach you everything I like, everything I need from a woman. There won't be much of you left afterward, but at least you would be free of my brother. Ava's eyes flashed green fire. You are disgusting. Stay away from me or I'll kill you myself. Oliver chuckled. Become quite the spitfire, haven't you? It's all King's doing, damn him. I liked it better when you were cowering at a man's feet. He's ruining you, turning you into something fierce and wild. I bet my dear brother has no idea what you're capable of. How precisely am I ruining her? Kingston asked, his countenance grim as he entered the game room. In one hand, he carried a dark blue folder, much like the one containing the ledger sheets documenting Carson's debts. Oliver stepped away from Ava, taking a nonchalant sip of his bourbon. Seems your pretty prisoner is finding her backbone. But we both know how flashes of rebellion end for women involved with the Winter Men. They just don't have a great track record of surviving us, do they? In customary fashion, Kingston ignored Oliver's taunts. He stalked toward the pair of them, head tilted quizzically upon seeing the pool stick Ava gripped so tightly. A twinkle of understanding lit his eyes upon realizing she held it like a weapon. The smirk on his face only deepened at seeing her unspoken relief at his return. Tisking softly, he easily disarmed her, plucking the pool stick from her cold hands and flinging it onto the table where it clattered noisily against the dark gray worsted wool. The blue folder was casually tossed down beside it. Did you miss me, lamb? Kingston murmured. He circled her in a predatory manner, brushing Oliver aside in an overtly masculine show of ownership. Ava's gaze zeroed in on the folder. What does it contain? Kingston pressed closer, filling her senses, demanding her attention until Ava's eyes raised to meet his dark blue ones. He lifted a lock of her hair, rubbing the strands between his thumb and forefinger. Well, did you? It was a mocking question. He knew Ava would not and could not give the answer he expected. Such an admission was an indicator of affection, and she certainly did not harbor that emotion. No. She would not show fear, but she also could not conceal the relief that he stood beside her, a necessary barrier between herself and Oliver. Liar. I suppose I'll add that to the growing list of your transgressions. Kingston cupped Ava's elbow, carefully avoiding the bruising Malcolm left behind. His fingers caressed her skin through the fluttering long sleeves of the green silk blouse. When he touched her so gently, so possessively, it was as though fire licked along her limbs. Ava's gaze flickered to Oliver. He had returned to stand beside the bar, a little smirk stretching his cruel mouth as he watched them. Those light blue eyes of his glittered like ice. Kingston spun Ava so she faced away from him. Her hands automatically gripped the edge of the pool table, but even as Kingston's body pressed harder against her own, she did not bend. Standing straight, she resisted the subtle insistence that she submit to his wishes. "Shall I punish you now, with my brother as witness?" Kingston murmured in her ear. "You won't," Ava gasped out, fear mingling with red-hot desire. It was horrible. This dizzying, irrational need for this man's touch, his mouth, his cock. She could not understand why the degradation he subjected her to always turned her into a trembling mess. Kingston's hands skated down to her hips. He gripped her harder, fingers digging in through her blue jeans. "It would prove my ownership, show everyone you are truly mine now that Carson has abandoned you. And Oliver, well, he likes to watch these things." Kingston nuzzled her ear. Skimming his lips along the side of Ava's neck, he directed his words to the other man. "Don't you, brother?" "You know me too well, King," Oliver confirmed with a quick draining of his scotch. His gaze contained hot glints of resentment, but he remained on the opposite side of the room, the glass held loosely in his hand. Ava's breath ratcheted higher. Would Kingston really punish her while Oliver watched? "You're toying with me, playing with my head. You won't let him near me like that. I know you won't." She sucked in a quick breath when Kingston nipped her earlobe. "You don't know what I will and won't allow, Ava." He chuckled, a dark sound that spiked Ava's heart rate. "I can do anything I wish with you. Anything. And you will obey." Ava's mouth clamped shut, her grip on the pool table tightening with the truth of Kingston's statement. "Isn't that right, lamb?" The words were a low purr. "If I tell you to drop to your knees for another man's pleasure, you will obey. If I let him fuck you, use you however he desires, you will obey. Because I own you now, and my word is law while I own you." "Are you fucking with me right now, King?" Oliver grunted. "Don't flash her at me like a shiny toy if you have no intention of letting me play. It's a shitty thing to do, and you know it." A tidal wave of fear washed over Ava. Would Kingston give her to Oliver, let him touch her, abuse her? Would he let other men do unspeakable things? He couldn't. He wouldn't. She had to believe his lust demanded she served only his own depraved needs. "What do you wish me to do, sir?" Ava's bold question surprised Kingston. He hesitated, fingers loosening on her hips as he absorbed it. She sensed the struggle within him, the need to control and dominate her fighting against his possessive nature. "Bend your ass over this table." His thigh was silky smooth. "Now." Ava complied, heart pounding with trepidation. She could not say why she obeyed his husky command, why she bent at the waist and remained perfectly still as Kingston encircled her wrists within his much larger hands. When he anchored them in the small of her back, Ava moaned. There was a terrible darkness inside her that relished the way he handled her. It was wicked and twisted, silently begging for more. That darkness encompassed her rational nature, leaving Ava horribly off balance and adrift with confusion. How can I like this? How can I want his roughness, his domination? I must be going insane. Kingston simply waited until Ava's panicked breathing slowly leveled out. A strange calmness seeped into her bones. Hadn't he taken care of her so far during this ordeal? Admittedly, her situation could be so much worse. She could be drugged into submission, beaten, raped repeatedly by multiple men, tortured. She would have been shattered into a million pieces by now in the hands of someone else, someone like Oliver. Instead, she'd been kept relatively safe. Now she must trust Kingston to keep his word that no one else would hurt her. No one other than Kingston himself. Turn your head, Ava. Place your cheek flush against the table. Ava obeyed, and the wool of the table's surface surprisingly cool against her flushed skin. The folder containing God only knew what sat within her line of eyesight. He won't hurt me. He won't. Impressive, Oliver drawled. Ava could not see him from this angle, but she heard ice tinkle and the sound of liquid as he poured another drink. Does she sit up and beg for treats too? More importantly, will she be so obedient when we take her at the same time? Will she snap at me when I fuck her? I hope so. God, I hope she bites me. Can't wait to sink my teeth into her, to taste her, have her blood on my tongue, her pussy caught between my teeth. Ava jerked in response to the filthy ugliness of Oliver's words, but Kingston's grip tightened on her wrists. Moving closer, his body pinned her hips to the table until she was immobile. The carved wood railing it pressed painfully into her belly. She focused on the warmth of Kingston's hips against her bottom. The implied violence of his strength was all that kept her from falling into a heap of hysterics. She focused on him. Shh. Kingston soothed. Steady, lamb. Ava experienced a swirling moment of deja vu. He'd said those same words once before, the day she arrived in this house of madness, the day her life turned upside down in a jumble of lust and fear. Steady, lamb. Make no mistake, Oliver, Kingston said in a deadly soft tone. When Ava shifted slightly on her feet, she was held in place with an even heavier hand. I'll not share her. I'll not allow anyone to touch her. And I'll be damned if I let anyone else fuck her. I'm telling you this and proving her obedience so you do not make the mistake of thinking otherwise. This one is not available for your enjoyment. Kingston ran his hand down the length of Ava's spine. The soft thread of his fingertips told her to remain still or suffer the consequences, but she could not help her response. Squirming against him, panic rose once more in her chest. The depths of Kingston's possessiveness spoken aloud was eye-opening. She isn't here for your pleasure or for you to torment, Kingston continued calmly. She's here because she's mine. Until I decide otherwise, she's mine. You will treat her with respect and deference for her position as mine. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to dismiss you in the same manner I dismissed Malcolm. All of my men understand this. Do you, brother? There was a long stretch of silence. With her face smashed against the table, Ava could not see either man, but violence swirled in the air between them. Like electrical jolts of energy, animosity, and hate shimmered and snapped. She was caught in the middle of that bad blood now, a target for Oliver and an outlet for the younger man to hurt the half-brother he despised. The danger of her new status was glaringly obvious. She was not safe as Kingston's property, as his personal toy. If anything, she was at a greater risk than ever before because of it. His enemies would use her to get to him. Did Kingston realize what he had done in claiming her with such ferocity? A little sob escaped Ava's throat before she could swallow it back down. Terror bubbled inside her. She kicked out a leg in mindless reaction. Kingston's hand around her wrists tightened imperceptibly. It was a subtle reminder that he ruled her and everyone else in his orbit. Oliver laughed softly. Of course, King, I get what you're saying. I should treat your new pet as if she were a dear treasured sister. His tone was slightly sarcastic. Right? Something like that, Kingston replied in a mildly amused tone. Now get the fuck out and close the door when you go. It seems this pet requires firmer instruction when it comes to her new status.